Wow. So good to see everyone. Um, Thank you, Drew. But I'm really excited to be with you all today. I've been in Midtown since the summer of 2018, and it's been quite a while now, and we're on the tail end. I'm actually on a 3-year residency for church planting. So this is so surreal in a way that this is the last time I'll be preaching on Zoom, and then we'll be off and planting a church among internationals and open to everyone, obviously. So I just want to thank everyone that's been supporting us and that's been praying for us in this whole season, for all those that we've met throughout these past 3 years. We're just so thankful for your prayers, for your friendship, for your encouragement, for Andrea and I, and for little baby Leo. So yes, very, very encouraged. But I'm also really excited for what's to come. And it's like a bittersweet season of transition, leaving a place where we've called our home church for about 3 years now, going towards building a new one. And that's what God's kingdom is all about. Keep spreading the love of Jesus. But very glad to be here with you all. And I'm still on the Easter spirits, really very central to our faith for us Christians, and the resurrection of Jesus. Just been a week. Um, and I just wanted to share a little bit about how it has been for me in the past couple of weeks, just being really um, meditating on this theme of Easter and resurrection and life and death and faith and all this sort of stuff. But I wanted to talk to you about this thing called faith and and what it really means, what faith means. And actually, Andrea, my beautiful wife, she looked it up she loves to look up on definitions, and she's like, oh, let me just look that up and see what's the definition of faith. And faith means complete trust or confidence in someone or something. That is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Now I saw this definition and I thought, well, faith is not just for religious folks, it's everyone have faith in someone or in something. And I'll give you a quick example. For me, I'm a big fan of real football. Maybe some of you will disagree, but you know, they call it soccer over here in the US. But anyhow, I'm a big fan of football, and especially for the national team of Peru. I have like a, a few jerseys that I wear whenever we're playing on a playoff or the qualifiers for the World Cup. And so actually, the last World Cup on Russia 2018 was a very special World Cup because Peru actually went to a World Cup after more than 30 years. Believe it or not, we have not been on a World Cup for about 32 years or so. And actually, I was not born the last time Peru was on the World Cup, which was in 1982, right? And finally, I'm alive now. I'm seeing this team that I've always felt to see through the World Cup. I was watching the qualifiers. I was hoping and having faith that they will make it. And now, after all these, decades of having faith on my team, they finally made it to the World Cup, right? And I'm very exciting and watching all the games. And then we were on actually the group of where France was. And I always joke I have a couple of friends from France, and at that time actually I had faith, I have trust on this team that we were going to pass to the qualifiers, to the actually on the World Cup to the next stage after the group stage. But guess what? We didn't. We just stayed on the group stage, right? And then we lost against France for 2-0, and we needed to win to pass to the next round. And you know what's funny? I had to grieve it, even though I was excited we made it to the World Cup. I have faith on my team. I have full confidence that they were going to win, but they did not. And Andrea comes and, sees me down and sees me grieving. And she's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, we just lost, we lost. And people would think that I'm grieving something else, but no, it's just that my team lost. And then I was like, but for you guys, like French, I was talking to my French friends, is for you guys, it was different, right? Like you have faith on your team and you won the World Cup. You pass the next round, then you pass to the next one until you went to the final and you won the World Cup, the highest of prizes. And your faith paid off because you have faith on your team and you won. And there was celebration all over France in 2018. And but in our case, it didn't, right? So it depends where you put your faith. Sometimes it's gonna be fun and awesome and celebratory, and sometimes you gotta grieve it. Um, so actually, I've been thinking about this thing, something as mundane as simple as a team, right? But I've been thinking how every decision that we make, no matter how simple, it is actually a matter of faith. I mean, think about it. I can see some of you sitting on a couch right there with your family. I saw a little dog running around. That was kind of cute. But you put trust on that chair that is not going to fall, right? Even on the everyday things of life. I'm sitting down right now hoping that this chair doesn't fall, right? Like we trust that the subway is going to come on time. Sometimes it doesn't, New Yorkers, right? But we trust, that the subway is going to take me to point B, that it's not going to crash. We trust that the masks are going to protect us from COVID, right? We have all these everyday trust and faith on different things on everyday life, right? But not only, I don't only think that it's okay, it's a matter of faith in our everyday decisions. When we go somewhere, when we do something, we trust on our spouse, maybe we trust on our parents, on something that if we lend money, they will pay us back. There's all sorts of things, right? But I want to argue, though, that actually trust, faith is directly related to the concepts of death and life. You might be asking, how so? How is faith related to death and life? And I will argue again that it is. Think about, you are drinking water and eating food. And guess what? You eat and drink, right? Because you have to survive. If you don't eat today, if you don't drink water, actually, if you don't drink water for more than 3 days, you might get dehydrated and die. If you don't eat for several days, for many weeks, you are gonna die. Therefore, we eat, right? Therefore, we drink water, right? For example, you work. You're working because you want to sustain your family. If you don't work, you cannot bring food to the table. You cannot survive. So basically, we believe in these things in faith. Why? On this simple task of life, because we don't want to die. We don't want to, we want to live, right? Also, we stop on the red light because we don't want to crash and die, right? So even as you're crossing the street, you're trusting that the car on the red light is not gonna push, it's not gonna like put the accelerator and hit you, and then you might go to the hospital or die. You don't want that, but you're trusting that they won't, and they have a red light, so they stop, you go, or you stop if you're in the car. So there's all these things that we do, because we want to live, because we don't want to die. Now, think about COVID. We have families that have moved out of the city of New York, right? Or perhaps other cities, if you're somewhere else in the US or the world, like they've moved out. Why? Because they're afraid of getting contaminated, of getting infected. Why? Because there's a chance that they might die. Therefore, they leave the city, right? Actually, grandparents haven't met their grandkids. Parents haven't been able to attend their kids' wedding. All of this because they were taking care not to die. So the pandemic has brought that into an even deeper level. Like we are thinking about all these things. Why? Because we don't want to die, and we're sacrificing. Even the global economy has been, terribly affected. Why? Because we don't want to die. We want to live, right? Now, on the other hand, though, have you ever used this term? This is so life-giving, right? I mean, we use it sometimes. This is so life-giving, so full of life. Now, that brings you joy, that brings you life, right? So, for example, we experience the birth of a baby, or that is life-giving. We go out for a walk in nature. Right now, because of spring, we're seeing the cherry blossom here in New York City, and you're seeing life, and that brings joy to the heart. That is a life-giving moment, right? Even when we see justice, when injustices happen in the world, in the midst of hate crimes and racism and inequalities, when there is a portion of that justice that was served, right? There was justice that was served to someone, that's life-giving, right? Or think about maybe something that you love to do, something that you're passionate, or you're doing that, you're playing football maybe, or you are volunteering somewhere, or something, and then you are full of life, right? That is very life-giving. So now, I have been talking about these three concepts, right? I've been talking about faith, been talking about life, and I've been talking about death, and I've been talking about life. So three concepts: faith, death, and life, right? Now, and I've been talking how they're interconnected in our everyday life. Even though we don't think about it, it is. Maybe people on developing countries might feel it more than we do, but we still eat, we still drink, we still are careful. Even in COVID, we have felt that weight of that coming at the door, right? But you know what? I saw this interconnection between faith, death, and life. And then I realized, oh shoot, these three concepts are in the most quoted verse in the Bible, the verse that we just read, the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 16. Jesus says, "For God so loved the world," the concept of love, so important. He loves so much the world that he sent his only son, so that whoever believes, now we know that faith is believing, having full trust, full confidence. Whoever has faith, right? Whoever believes in him shall not die, but have everlasting life. So you have, right? Believe, faith. You have death. You shall not die, but you shall live. Now, maybe you're not a Christian, or maybe you are, but maybe when you think of church, you think of church as a fire insurance. Just something that will take you out of hell after you're dead, right? But let me tell you, it's not just that. Whatever you believe then, and whatever you're thinking of death and life, that is actually going to affect your everyday life. Now, how does that has to do with the theme of Easter, right? Like on these weeks that we've been talking about this, the resurrection of Jesus. But that is what this is all about. Jesus going to heaven, bringing life, Jesus coming from heaven here and being resurrected before he ascended to heaven. And that represents that death was defeated. Now, Christians in faith, right, we believe that Jesus came back to life on the third day, that was last Sunday, after his death on the cross. So now those that believe on the resurrection of Jesus, hence, I argue that we have a different perspective. It's not that Christ followers are never anxious or sad, but there is a hope that we should be holding on to, right? Now, the good news is that if you don't know Jesus, if you know Jesus, then there is a hope you can hold on to beyond the anxiety of death, especially now in COVID times, right? Or the death of someone that you love, right? So that doesn't mean that Christians don't have anxiety and don't cry and don't grieve. I mean, I was grieving for my team, but you know, it's like when you set a house, as Jesus on the Gospels, he says, when you set a house on a strong foundation, it's not that the storm doesn't come on the house that had a strong foundation of a rock rather than a foundation on a sand. It's not that the house that was built on the foundation of sand had a storm and the one that had a foundation of rock didn't have a storm. both had the storm. It's just, and actually both of them were shaken by the storm, but only one was crumbled and was destroyed, which was the one that was founded on sand. But the one that was founded on rock was shaken but not destroyed. It was shaken but not destroyed. And it's the same with this concept. If you believe in me, says Jesus, you shall not die but have everlasting life. And that concept alone, you might have storms in life. You might cry, you might grieve, you might lament, and we show the Psalms teaches us that to lament. But there is hope beyond death. And I'm not talking about that you're gonna think about when you're on your deathbed. No, that is gonna affect your everyday life. Your anxiety levels will subside. You are not gonna be, you might be sad, but you won't go into depression, right? You might be preoccupied, but you won't go into an anxiety attack, right? You might grieve, but you might not give up on life and live a life full of depression, right? So that is the hope beyond death, right? So, in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that your perspective of death and life will affect the way you live on your everyday life now. So, whatever you put your trust and confidence or faith in other words, will affect your everyday life now. Now, I'll tell you a quick story of mine before we finish today. And this was back in 2012. I was doing a master's on a seminary. Seminary is a school where they teach you theology and God stuff. And I was there, and I remember there was a professor on Old Testament. Basically, he taught us about Israel and taught us about the culture behind scriptures, the Hebrew people, the Hebraic people that were the ones that wrote the Bible and all that sort of stuff. And I was so fascinated by it. And he was a very smart guy. He spoke all these dead languages, and he was so good at this stuff. And then he said that he always had a trip to Israel every other year. Now that year he was gonna have one, but I knew that year I was not gonna go. It was my first year at seminary anyways, 1 out of 3 years. But there was something in my heart, that thing that you feel sometimes in your heart, even when you're not a believer, a Christian, that thing that you feel in your heart about Jesus is because he wants you to believe in him if you're not a Christian. And if you are, it's because he wants you to draw you to himself. And that thing that I felt that time, I felt that God was like, hey, go to Israel and go not this time, but next time. And I had this kind of surreal faith that I was going to go 3 years from that time to Israel, regardless of my immigration status. Now, I am a Peruvian citizen. I was on an international student visa, right? So I knew like always times were weird because sometimes I'll be in between paperwork and I kind of leave the country and all that sort of stuff. So guess what? I had it on the mind. I was like, God, no matter my immigration status, I'm going to leave US to go to Israel that time. And actually that was what it was. And then the time came 3 years later, January 2015, and that was the trip. And guess what? I was in between statuses. I was going from a student visa to a worker visa because I was going to become a worker with youth at a church, and then obviously everyone, the immigration consultant, my family, everyone was like, you shouldn't leave because if you leave, guess what? You're going to lose your status. Because by law, when you leave a country in the middle of your immigration status, you are abandoning that, which means that they're going to just cancel that process, which takes about 6 months, 5, 6 months. Well, and a lot of 2 to 3 months before of tedious work. But then my mom, I remember telling me, because mom's care, they love us. And she said, Piero, Israel is not going to move. He's going to stay there forever. He's been there for thousands of years. He can wait for you a few more months. But I had this conviction, this thing, this faith, and I went. And then guess what? Everyone came back and I couldn't come back because I didn't have a visa to come back to. So I ended up staying 10 extra days. And those 10 days were one of the most amazing, peaceful times of my life. And I thought I was going to get approved on my visa or whatever, but I didn't. So I actually had to go to the consulate and get a student visa to go back. And then eventually went back, after 10 days after the trip was over. But guess what? The status was not canceled. Actually, on Easter, and that's the good thing, we're in Easter season. On Easter of 2015, the visa was approved to become a worker. So that was a weird thing. It's almost as if I never left the country, though they have record of it, though they knew about it, and though the law says that they should have canceled my process. And I looked online, I did research. Everyone was like, if you leave, they're gonna deem you as if you abandoned this. But it didn't happen. And then God reminded me, I'm above every authority, even of the most powerful countries in the world, like the US. And he reminded me, like, that is a perspective that you need. Like, hey guys, you may ask, oh, Piero, you have faith. That's awesome. You probably were chilling. I was like, no, I was afraid. I was crying almost every night on the hotel room in Israel, asking God, like, you got to show up. What am I supposed to do? It was like that. It's not like it's easy. No, there was a risk that I had to take, but it was the most beautiful thing. Now, you might be asking, what does this have to do with life and death, Piero? And I will tell you, well, if I would have gone by logic, right, because I want to survive in life, I want to follow what I'm supposed to follow, right? I'm going to stay in the US. That's what I feel, I need to do to live the life that I'm supposed to be living, right? A lot of immigrants come here because if they stay at home, they might not be able to give food to their families, right? So I could have gone by logic. I could have gone by what everyone else says that I should do, but I rather was like, no, I have this faith in someone that actually defeated death. If he defeated death, he can be above any authority, and that changes everything. Now my question is, now we've been talking faith, death, life, Easter, Jesus. Simple. He came, died for you, died for your sin, died for your injustices, the injustices of the world, so that we might not have to. So that if you believe in him, you shall have life. So if you're not a Christian, good news. Come to him. He wants you. The Spirit is taunting your heart right now. And if you are, he's taunting to believe in him, the one that defeated death. And in your everyday life, to have a hope beyond death. So as you know, if you think about it, if I have a family that I know, well, I have a hope that they actually can be healed supernaturally today because God can do it, even if they're terminally ill. But if they don't, I know they will be healed on the other side of heaven. There is a hope beyond that. I will grieve, I will cry, I will miss them, but I won't be destroyed, right? So now before we finish, let me ask you a question. How your perspective of death and life has affected your everyday life. How, where are you setting your faith on what or on whom? Is it Jesus or is it our work, our food, our jobs, a vaccine? Where is it? Is it beyond that? Because you can take the vaccine and then you can go out and then someone pushes the accelerator and you're out. Is it beyond the things that we see? Let's pray. God, I pray that those that might not know you, that they will know you today. Lord, I pray, Jesus, that as they come into a place of knowing, God, as we've come before, of knowing our nature, that we've done injustices in the world, that you've died for us and that you give us a hope beyond death. And you say, if we believe in you, God, we shall have life. So, Lord, I pray for those we believe that you did that for us. Will you come and dwell in our hearts? But those that know you, God, what are those areas that we've been setting idols and we've been setting faith on the wrong thing or on the wrong person, on the wrong job, or on the wrong way of getting ourselves saved and alive rather than yourself? So, God, we place ourselves and rest in you, for you said, Jesus, come, all of you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And I will give you a peace that the world cannot give you, one that will trespass all understanding. And you demonstrated that you can give us that, for you have defeated death on the third day, and now you're walking among us and having a meal with us. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.